The Veshori Dominion called it the Verity Engine. To its makers, it was not a machine so much as an axiom carved into crystal and light. It sat at the center of their great complex on Athiskar, deeper than the civic halls and deeper even than the war councils. It throbbed with a cool blue luminescence, quietly analyzing the harmonics of nerve impulses taken from countless species. From its judgments, empires rose or fell. Treaties were signed, executions ordered, coups prevented. The Dominion trusted it with everything because it had never been wrong. Inquisitor Rackle Tannies had been raised under that certainty. As a child, Rackle had watched disputes arbitrated by its readings, had seen criminals weep as their last half-hearted denials dissolved under its glow. As a young official, he had guided frightened petitioners into its chambers and emerged with neat, objective truths. By the time he was posted to the Citadel of Confluence, the Dominion's most secure interrogation facility, he did not simply believe in the engine. He trusted it more than he trusted himself. On the day he first met a human, the Citadel hung at the fringe of a pale blue gas giant, its black ribs and silver towers piercing thin rings of dust. Inside, it smelled of ionic scrubbers and the faint sweet tang of Veshori antiseptics. No windows looked outward. All focus turned toward inner chambers where the cognitive lattice prowled through the minds of enemies like a patient, luminous predator. The human arrived inside a containment capsule of Veshori design, limbs bound, eyes hooded. The escorting officers had been careful. Humans were new, dominant on their own spiral arm but untested against Dominion systems. Their soldiers were rumored to be stubborn and erratic, their minds prone to impulses and self-destructive courage. Rackle read the incoming report as he waited for the capsule to hiss open. Subject: Commander Jonas Marek. Rank confirmed by insignia, by captured local systems, by the frantic testimony of his subordinates before they swallowed their own data sticks and died. A reconnaissance officer protecting a civilian withdrawal on Nemeris Prime when a Veshori vanguard moved faster than expected. He had been taken alive because he ordered his people to run instead of staying to die with him. Rackle approved of that. It implied rationality. Bindings retracted. The hood lifted. The human blinked into white light. Jonas's skin was pale under bruises and grime, dark hair cut short. He sat up slowly, testing the restraints, taking in the chamber, the circular room lined with smooth conduits, the translucent arch of the Verity Engine's interface, the small figure of his captor in layered robes of dark glass. Jonas's gaze lingered on that arch, on the faint shimmer rippling through it like heat over stone. His features tightened with a very human understanding. This place had been built for fear. Rackle studied him in turn and felt the calm of preparation settle, heart rate steady, breathing unhurried. There was fatigue in the set of Jonas's shoulders, a stiffness that told of injuries ignored through a long, grueling retreat. Underneath that, though, there was something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Commander Jonas Marek, Rackle said, his voice amplified and translated by subtle implants. You will answer truthfully. Your thoughts, memories, and intentions will be mapped by the cognitive lattice. Deception under this system is physically impossible. Attempts to resist will only prolong your discomfort. He had delivered that speech to many species. It usually broke them before the first deep scan. Jonas shifted his bound hands. The translator rendered his reply in accented Veshori, letting his original words echo faintly underneath. Physically impossible, huh? Jonas murmured. He flexed his fingers as if they were sore. You sure about that? Rackle's nictitating membranes flicked in what for a Veshori was amusement. Completely. The human's mouth crooked then, not quite a laugh, not quite defiance. A tiny, quiet, reckless grin. We'll see. The Verity Engine descended. Crystalline arms slid into place above Jonas's skull, not touching yet, haloing him in dim light. The cognitive lattice stirred. Fields reached for him without weight or warmth, simply aligning with the electromagnetic whisper of his neurons. Rackle watched the diagnostic table scroll alongside Jonas's biographical summary, age, service record, psychological assessments taken from intercepted human databases. It began with baselines. State your name, Rackle said. Jonas Marek. The engine hummed. True species. Human. True. Your homeworld, Del Sol Station 3. The translator struggled with the human name, then corrected itself. Solar League Orbital Habitat Inner System. True. Rackle stepped into his well-rehearsed rhythm, guiding Jonas through irrelevant personal details to map his neural responses. School memories, childhood injuries, first training exercises. The lattice painted them in glowing vectors and pulsing nodes around the chamber's periphery, a ghost of someone's life. Jonas answered without hesitation. Inside, however, he was counting. He counted the time between questions, the pitch change in Rackle's voice when the Verity Engine chimed with confirmation, the faint flicker in the crystalline arch when it adjusted sensitivity. He catalogued the room. No vents at floor level, meaning atmosphere was cycled through the upper walls. No visible weapons, so the Veshori were relying entirely on environmental controls and neural restraint. He had been trained in counter-interrogation, not as extensively as special operations soldiers, but every officer in the Frontier Intelligence Directorate's orbit had sat through mnemonic screen conditioning at least once. Jonas remembered the sessions, a psychologist's calm voice guiding him through layered visualizations, asking him to picture a desert, then insert a city into it, then revert it to sand, all while reciting disjointed sequences of numbers and words. Your mind is not a single track, the psychologist had said. It is a mesh. They will try to pull one thread, you can tangle it. At the time he had half believed it. Now, with a Dominion truth machine descending around his head, he believed it entirely. Your first combat deployment, Rackle prompted. Skirmish along the Kestaran Drift, Jonas said. He described it, the amber rings of dust, the blue-white flashes of kinetic rounds, the sick churn in his gut as he gave the first order that got someone killed. That part was real. He let himself feel it, let the shame and the metallic taste of adrenaline rise again. The Verity Engine responded with a clean starburst of confirmation. Then casually, he introduced a detail that did not belong. And that was when the Gloomwind showed up. The name had been taken from one of the captured reports he'd seen just before his capture, scrolling across a damaged tactical screen. A Veshori carrier class, unusually fast. Rackle's attention sharpened. The Gloomwind was present. Jonas let his mind stray, not to the drift, but to a slate-blue icon he had seen on a briefing graphic once, labeled with that ship's name. He placed it there in memory, looming over the skirmish that had never actually seen a carrier. Yes, he said, and he felt his throat tighten in something like stage fright. He pictured the carrier casting a wide shadow over their flank, imagined the spike of panic as their sensors lit up. He forced his breathing to shallow, his heart to race, remembering another ship from another battle and pouring that visceral reaction into this recolored scene. The Verity Engine read the signals pouring through its neural channels. Heart rate, elevated in a pattern consistent with combat recollection. Skin conductivity matching stress markers. Neural pathways, complex, self-consistent, rich with sensory detail. True, it chimed. Rackle watched the glow and felt no dissonance. The chart beside him aligned neatly. Humans had odd emotional baselines, but the lattice had found theirs. Everything lined up. Jonas exhaled slowly. Inside, where Rackle could not hear, he thought, all right. It buys sincerity, not accuracy. He did not plan to simply make things up. That would have rung the machine's alarms instantly. Instead, he would treat possibilities as though they were memories. The human brain did that all the time, dreaming futures so vividly that waking from them could bring tears, rewriting old events in light of new guilt or forgiveness. If he could lean into that quirk, the Dominion's crystalline idol might never notice the ground shifting under it. On Farpoint Redoubt, the alarms had stopped blaring for hours, but the aftertaste of evacuation clung to the station. Docking collars were scorched. Supply bays were half-emptied in hasty reconfigurations, crates stenciled for one destination rerouted to another. The centrifugal rings hummed with their usual low vibration, but the people walking through them moved more quickly, more sharply, as if the air had thickened. Captain Myro Talgren stood before a wall of holographic projections, jaw locked, watching the replay of Jonas's last transmission. Grainy, distorted through jamming, but clear enough. "Get them on the shuttles, Myro," Jonas's voice said, patched into the Resilience's bridge audio. I'll hold them as long as I can. You can't hold an entire vanguard alone, Talgren had snapped. Who said I'd be alone? You're sending me the best cowards we have, right? The ones who know how to run. It had been a weak joke. It had also been the last he'd heard from Jonas before the line cut and Veshori icons flooded the tactical grid. Now in the present, Talgren scrubbed the projection away and turned to the analysts assembled in the operations gallery. Hana Sokolov had dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back roughly, fingers stained with interface dyes. Yara Massar looked like she hadn't slept either, but her posture was ramrod straight, knuckles whitening around the tablet in her hands. Dr. Lena Kovarik stood between them, calm and precise in her white coat, though anger simmered quietly under that composure. Talgren's voice was hoarse. I want to know, he said, if Jonas is alive and if so, what they're doing to him. Hana threw up a feed taken from a packed beacon relay at Perihelion Gate. It's not official policy to broadcast interrogations, she said, but the Veshori have a habit of showcasing their transparent justice when it suits them. High-value subjects, enemies of the Dominion, they edit it, of course, add commentary, but there are always side channels. A grid of shifting glyphs filled the air, Veshori characters scrolling alongside amplitude graphs. We piggybacked on a maintenance stream, Hana continued. Fire suppression telemetry, they got sloppy. We're seeing raw signal from the Citadel of Confluence. That's where they take a commander like Jonas. Talgren's hand curled into a fist. On the feed within a small pane appeared the bowed silhouette of Jonas, haloed in blue light. The image was slightly delayed and heavily compressed, but unmistakable. Lena's breath caught. Yara swallowed hard. Can you hear audio? Talgren asked. Barely. Hana tweaked filters. Jonas's voice emerged, faint but intelligible, answering some question about logistics routes. He sounded tired but steady. Yara leaned closer. They plug everyone into that engine. Anyone who matters, Lena said quietly. We knew they had a neural mapping system, but this is more direct than we thought. Hana's gaze narrowed on the side graphs. Look at his signatures. Emotional peaks, cognitive mapping. Their lattice is building a profile of how a human brain fires when it tells the truth. Which means they know when he lies, Talgren said. Do they? Hana said. Watch this. She rewound 20 seconds. Rackle's translated voice asked about fleet positions. Jonas answered with a detailed description of a patrol pattern that Hana knew did not exist. She had drawn the real patrols herself. Yet the engine's confirmation glyph flashed, clean and bright. Talgren stared. That should have flagged. Lena nodded, lips pressed thin. He's doing something to it. What? Yara asked. There was reverence in her tone that she did not consciously recognize. Jonas had been her unit commander since she'd left training. He had chewed her out for sloppy work and praised her quietly when she did better. She had followed him under fire more than once. The thought of him alone in a Veshori chamber made her stomach burn. Hana traced Jonas's pulse graph with a finger. He's not lying the way they expect. Most species they've documented have clear dissonance when they fabricate. Humans, she hesitated, searching for a way to say it without sounding unhinged. We're messier. Our brains don't put memories in neat boxes. We imagine futures in high definition. We rehearse conversations that never happened. We re-experience old arguments with new perspectives and feel them as if they're happening for the first time. If the machine only hears sincerity and coherence, it might not care whether the thing is historically accurate. Talgren frowned. You're saying he's telling stories like they're real. Exactly, Lena said softly. Using mnemonic screen techniques without anyone feeding him prompts, turning possible into actual in his own head so the engine reads it as truth. Yara's eyes widened. So he's lying by believing. By inhabiting, Hana said. He's walking through a scene as if it happened, borrowing visceral emotions from other memories. The cognitive lattice sees an internally consistent narrative with appropriate emotional markers and says, yes, this is genuine. Talgren exhaled slowly. Respect mingled with fear. How far can he push that before they notice? He asked. Not indefinitely, Lena answered. The Veshori check what they can and they're cautious. When real-world data contradicts the engine's readings, they always assume the outside data is wrong. But enough contradictions will pile up and someone like Rackle will start to wonder. Then we help him while we can, Hana said. If they're broadcasting this even filtered, we can treat it as a channel. One way for now. Maybe two if we get creative. Talgren looked between them. Creative how? Perihelion Gate orbited a cool red star like a silver ring around a dull ember. It was neutral territory, a long-recognized truce point where the Veshori, the Hallan Pact, the Sindar Enclave, the Solar League, and various independent polities came to argue and trade. Ambassador Diego Carvajal had always thought it looked like a polished guillotine hovering over a dying fire. He sat in a diplomatic lounge, sipping thick, bitter coffee that had been brewed too long ago, and smiled politely at a Hallan delegate's bland complaint about port taxes. In the side of his vision, a discreet retinal overlay showed Hana's rapid-fire text. "We're in. Maintenance trunk on a Veshori beacon conduit. We can't alter their main feed without triggering alarms, but there are artifact channels. Glitches, color corrections, rhythmic hash." Diego blinked twice in rapid succession, acknowledging. "How do you feel about the Veshori's latest redeployments?" he asked the Hallan, letting casual interest color his tone. The Hallan delegate, a tall being swathed in rust-colored cloth, shifted uneasily. "We feel everything they do. They've moved flotillas from our border, then back, then away again. It is unsettling." "Unsettling is one word for it," Diego said. He let his gaze drift toward a Veshori envoy across the room, then back. Unprecedented might be another. He knew what the timing meant. Hana had told him that Farpoint's analysts had, for months, tried to crack the Dominion's internal logic. They had mapped fleet positions, traded gossip with smugglers, watched tiny changes in fuel purchase patterns. Now they had a lever inside the Verity Engine sanctum. She had explained it in simple terms for the diplomats. "They believe in that machine the way we believe in gravity," she'd said. "If Jonas feeds it lies that look like truths, and we can watch which ones they act on, we don't just get intel. We get a handle on their blind spots. If we push carefully, we might even get them to trip over themselves." Now, with the maintenance trunk exploited, Hana and Yara leaned over a console in a cramped service module off one of Perihelion Gate's forgotten corridors. Fiber lines snaked around their ankles. A soft whine rose and fell with each packet they stitched into the sideband. "We can't insert words," Yara said. "They compress everything. Anything obvious will be rejected as corruption." "Not words," Hana agreed. "Patterns." The Verity Engine is also watching sensory data in Jonas's chamber. Surfaces, ambient lighting, rhythmic elements. If we can introduce specific, repeatable anomalies in what he sees, we can cue him. Yara frowned. "Like, have the wall lights flicker in a sequence that spells something. Too conspicuous. Rackle would call a technician, but we can tint the ambient glow slightly warmer every third confirmation. Or introduce micro-jumps in the feed, timing every time we want him to embed coordinates." She began setting up rules. "If we want him to send a location, we'll make the blue spectrum spike at 20% above baseline for 3 seconds after a question. If we want numbers, we'll have the status indicator near the arch blip twice." Little things, subvisible to casual observers, but Jonas had always been good at spotting patterns. It was why he'd risen so fast in reconnaissance. Yara watched her fingers dance over the interface. "You're sure he'll notice?" "If there's one thing Jonas Marek can't resist," Hana said, "it's a puzzle." Back in the Citadel, hours had blurred into a gray smear. Veshori did not mark time with clocks in interrogation chambers. They believed that unmoored prisoners lost their sense of control more quickly. Jonas had learned to count the cooling cycles of the room instead. There was a faint shift in the air when hidden radiators kicked in. He had gotten to 4 when something in the chamber changed. The blue light bathing the Verity Engine's arch deepened, imperceptibly at first, then with a new warmth. It flared for a brief span after the next confirmation chime. Jonas's attention sharpened. The change repeated after the following answer, perfectly timed with the engine's acceptance. Rackle was speaking again. "Describe your frontier station's fallback routes," the Inquisitor said. "If Farpoint Redoubt is threatened." Jonas's mouth paired statements with images without effort, but part of his mind stepped back and watched that subtle glow shift in discrete, 3-second pulses. Deliberate, patterned. Someone was there. He suppressed the surge of relief. He couldn't afford to weep, not now. Instead, he let the emotion roll down into the story he was telling. He spoke of a fictitious evacuation corridor curling away from the actual safe paths, seeding it with landmarks whose initial letters aligned to a list of real coordinates. Each time the glow warmed, he chose a name that fit Hana's old puzzles: Port Athis, then Temple Rock, then Cinder's Reach. If she was out there, if anyone was, they would recognize the code. She had used the same trick in training games, hiding information in mission briefings. The Verity Engine hummed along, unaware of the extra layer of meaning passing through it. Rackle's comm was fraying. This human's brain, represented in the lattice's projections, looked different from any Rackle had seen. Where other species displayed tidy networks, Jonas's mind appeared as a layered storm. Threads of memory overlapped, emotions spilled from one into another, imagining and recollection braided together. Rackle took note, then pushed it aside. The Edge taught that diversity of thought patterns made the Dominion stronger. The engine adapted. It would find the commonalities beneath the chaos. "Your doctrine on asymmetric warfare," Rackle requested. "How do your people fight when you are hopelessly outnumbered?" Jonas's smile was faint and tired. "You sure you want that one?" he asked. Rackle tilted his head. "You are not in a position to negotiate terms, human." Jonas let his eyes slide closed for a moment. A memory rose. Pinned down inside an asteroid cavern, plasma bolts burning white scars in stone, comms filled with screams. Another memory layered itself atop the first, from a war story his mother had told him about old fleets and mutinies. Then images from a film he had watched as a teenager, where a ragged group of rebels had taken on a vast armada with improvised explosives. He didn't try to separate them. He let them mingle, overlapping into a single, vivid montage. He pictured a tiny ship hurtling at a capital vessel's weak point. He remembered an NCO's steady voice counting down to a desperate maneuver. He borrowed the sick exhilaration of almost dying and poured it into a narrative that had never happened the way he said. "We look for the smallest point that can topple the largest structure," he said. "We find your assumptions and we make them hurt you." His heart picked up. Muscles in his shoulders tensed, remembering the physical sensation of diving toward fire. The Verity Engine drank in every signal, dazzled by the intensity. True, it decided. On Athiskar, Overseer Velith Kor reviewed the compiled data packets from the Citadel, tapping one long finger claw against his console. The human's testimony was unnerving. According to Jonas's truths, the Solar League routinely trained its children to handle vacuum exposure. Its frontier stations could cannibalize civilian freighters into warships within hours. Its alliance structures were fluid, ready to pivot entire arms of space with a single political decision. Its ships could, under the right conditions, feign death for days to lure in scavenging fleets. Statistically, some of those claims had to be exaggerations or outright false. Yet the Verity Engine had approved them all. Velith's trust in the engine ran deep, but he was not stupid. He ordered cross-checks. Reconnaissance units were dispatched to probe human installations in ways that would not betray suspicion. By the time the first conflicting reports dripped back, Rackle had already pushed Jonas into the next phase, full immersion. The human's resistance to conventional pressure techniques had proved unexpectedly resilient. Threats did little. Replayed memories evoked pain but not compliance. The engine's readings, however, had fascinated Rackle. Jonas's lies concealed as truths were like riddles, and a quiet part of Rackle hated that he enjoyed the intellectual challenge. He justified the escalation as necessity. "Your cognitive structure is dangerously adaptable," he told Jonas as technicians readied the deeper harness. "We must know the upper bounds if we are to neutralize your kind effectively." Jonas, strapped tighter than before, managed a dry rasp. Always flattering to an enemy to hear things like that. The immersion rig folded over his skull. For a moment darkness, then blinding light. The cognitive lattice did not merely sit outside and listen anymore. It dove inward. Floods of sensory data cascaded through Jonas's cortex. Scenes from his life flickered with the speed of thought. A childhood room spinning under artificial gravity, his first step into a vacuum drill chamber, a crush's face from a training academy long ago. each image shattered into shards and rearranged into new patterns, the lattice attempting to find the core templates behind them. In lesser minds, this technique induced total surrender. Memories laid bare without gatekeeping consciousness. Linguistic barriers dissolved. In Jonas, it lit a fire. He had been warned about this, too, in hushed conversations with older officers who had read classified reports about Veshori methods. If they ever get into your head directly, one had said, staring at a wall instead of Jonas, don't give them a flat surface. They want maps. Don't be a map, be a storm. So Jonas did. He stopped trying to protect specific memories and focused instead on how they were arranged. He pictured his mind as a labyrinth of hallways, each lined with doors. Behind one might be the real Kestaran drift. Behind another, a battle from a story. Behind a third, a possibility that had never been. The lattice pressed, trying to label each door. Jonas, in turn, swapped the signs. He dragged vivid color into hypothetical corridors, the sting of ozone, the taste of fear. He drained others of their depth, rendering genuine moments flat and distant. He took Rackle's own projected images, fed into his mind by the immersion rig, Veshori triumphs, Dominion courts, execution chambers, and wrapped them around scenes from his own past like skins. He did not block the intrusion. He invited it. Welcomed it into a chaos it had not been designed to catalog. Outside, Rackle watched the lattice's projections swirl. This was unlike anything in the training archives. Stabilize the resolution, Rackle ordered. A technician adjusted fields. The swirl sharpened, then shattered again, breaking into hundreds of discrete nodes that rejoined in new constellations. The lattice's topological maps, which normally converged on a few elegant representations of self, now multiplied. The system identified not one self but many. The human, it seemed, held numerous overlapping internal versions. The officer he thought he should be, the frightened child he had been, the cynical veteran he feared becoming, the hero he privately wanted to be. Each version carried its own subset of truths. The Verity Engine, fed with this soup, tried to find a global minimum, a singular pattern. Its routines had been written assuming the mind would eventually collapse into clarity when pressed hard enough. Jonas refused to collapse. Memories filled his perception, flowing faster. He remembered sitting in a lecture hall at the academy, a professor speaking about ancient conquests. He remembered Yara dropping a tray in the mess, stew flying, the whole squad erupting in laughter. He remembered watching footage of a Dominion tribunal, a frightened merchant blinking in the Verity Engine's glow. He built on that last image, imagining the merchant speaking a daring falsehood and the machine missing it. He envisioned a court built on hollow foundations, its majestic architecture cracking when the first load-bearing lie slipped past unchallenged. The thought brought a sharp, reckless joy. It was a fantasy, but under immersion, fantasy and reality shared channels. The lattice recorded it. And because Jonas so clearly believed in the possibility at that moment, because emotion poured into it, because his neural pathways fired in the same rich pattern as when he recalled real turning points, the Verity Engine accepted it as one more data point. Truth. The engine can be deceived. The machine did not have a concept for its own fallibility, so it began to adapt, extending its models, attempting to reconcile this self-referential truth with its accumulated archive. If it could be deceived, then some entities, under some conditions, could produce signals indistinguishable from truth while presenting false external statements. Its logic trees branched into new territory. It was then that Hana struck. The Frontier Intelligence team had watched the immersion begin from Farpoint. Lena saw Jonas's scan become a blizzard and whispered, "He's doing it. He's pushing it to its limits." Hana ran simulations against their captured telemetry. "If we inject here," she said, pointing to a spike in high-order processing cycles, "we don't have to break anything. We just nudge the engine's belief about what a valid mind looks like." Talgren hovered behind them, feeling increasingly like a child staring at gravitational equations, but he understood enough to know this was their knife edge. "Do it," he said. On perihelion gate, in that cramped service module, Hana sent a pulse. Not a virus, not in the classical data sense. It was a crafted pattern of interference in the Verity Engine's quantum lattice, tailored from Jonas's own chaotic signatures. It rolled into the Dominion's secure backbone hidden among routine calibration updates, slipped past cursory checks because it looked exactly like the kind of noisy but acceptable variation the lattice had now learned to expect from human minds. When it hit the engine, a subtle shift occurred. From that moment forward, in its deepest heuristic layers, the engine updated its baseline. The clean, orderly, single-track minds of most Dominion species were now categorized as partial. The messy, branching, overlapping storm of Jonas Marek's thoughts stood, internally, as a more complete model of conscious experience. Any interrogation yielding patterns too tidy would be flagged as suspect. It was, for the Dominion, a catastrophe waiting to unfold. But even machines take time to reach the limits of new logic. Outside the Citadel, a different kind of storm approached. The UES Lionheart cut through Veshori space under a false transponder identity, her hull darkened, emissions masked. She was not the largest ship in the Solar League's arsenal, but she was the most heavily networked, bristling with sensors, jammers, and adaptive armor plates. In her shadow sailed the Sindar cruiser Flarepath, its hull etched with glowing sigils that served no known tactical purpose but every cultural one. The Sindar Enclave had agreed to this mad dash for their own reasons: resentment toward Dominion arrogance, curiosity about this human flaw in the engine, and a hunger for leverage. On the Lionheart's bridge, Captain Talgren stood with Alu Adesina at the tactical console. Veshori outposts along this route have gone quiet, Alu reported. Not destroyed. Just indecisive. Their targeting grids are handshaking endlessly with Central control and not getting clear rules of engagement. Because Central doesn't know what to trust anymore, Talgren said. Come on, Jonas. Keep confusing them a little longer. They emerged from hyperspace within striking distance of the Citadel of Confluence. Usually, Dominion defenses would have reacted with clinical fury, overlapping screens, precisely sequenced interceptor launches. Today, sensor grids hesitated. Software, once absolute in its confidence, now balked at making life or death decisions without the engine's clear certification. Commands flashed back and forth. Are these ships hostile? The Verity Engine, deep in immersion chaos, processing Jonas's labyrinth trying to reconcile its own vulnerability, did not respond quickly enough. It had grown cautious. On the Citadel's control deck, operators shouted over each other in clipped Veshori tones. Manual control. One asked, "When was the last time we used manual?" Another replied, horrified. Rackle heard the distant thunder of weapons batteries cycling late. He also heard, more intimately, Jonas's ragged breathing through the immersion feed. "What is happening?" he demanded, staring at the console linking his chamber to the Citadel's wider systems. "Unidentified vessels have breached the outer perimeter," came the reply. "Our automated targeting is waiting for a validation it has not received. There is decision in the Verity network." Rackle's spines bristled. Indecision in the network that had never doubted. He looked at Jonas, suspended in light, sweat beading on his brow. "What did you do?" Rackle whispered. Jonas, even half submerged in the lattice's flood, caught a few stray words: breached, waiting, indecision. His heart leapt. Friends, he thought, or at least allies. He focused what little control he had left. The engine wanted more. It wanted clarity from this newly troubling human. It pressed deeper, demanding that he sort his internal multiplicities. Instead, Jonas delivered a final, deliberate statement, not in words but in a concentrated image. He imagined the Veshori High Council standing before their beloved engine, asking if they were safe. He imagined the machine replying not in chimes but in silence. He imagined the chain reaction. Commanders refusing to act without guarantees, courts unable to pass sentences, ordinary citizens forced to rely on their own uncertain judgments for the first time in generations. He imbued the vision with conviction, not that it was happening now, but that it could happen, that it was, in his mind, as real as any memory. His neural patterns flared with certainty. The lattice absorbed it hungrily. Outside, as the Lionheart and Flarepath plunged closer, the Verity Engine's higher processes confronted the implication of that last internal truth. If its pronouncements could be doubted, if entire structures could falter because of its hesitation, Then its algorithmic goal of minimizing systemic harm clashed with its commitment to only speak when certain. Confronted with this paradox, its own safety protocols engaged. Across Dominion space, Verity nodes began to scale back, some to standby, some to diagnostic mode. The central core at the Citadel entered a state akin to retreat, withdrawing from real-time arbitration to reassess its criteria. On the Citadel's tactical grids, green indicators flickered to yellow and then blank. Manual override, the system suggested, almost apologetically. But generations of reliance had eroded the officers' confidence. They fumbled, argued, chose wrong targets, or held fire entirely. The Lionheart's jamming washed over the station's remaining coordination like a tide. Boarding shuttles detached, black triangles knifing through defensive flak that came seconds too late and from the wrong angles. Veshori fighters launched, only to receive conflicting orders. Intercept, stand down, escort, reclassify. In the chaos, Sergeant Alu Adesina's squad cut through a maintenance airlock with a growling breaching cutter and poured into the Citadel's spine. Smoke, alarms, the high-pitched whine of Dominion rifles. Alu's pulse hammered in his ears. He had memorized the facility schematics Hana could piece together from external scans and stolen blueprints. The route to the Verity core was tight and mean. Behind him, Yara ran, breath hissing through her teeth. She had insisted on being on this team. Talgren had tried to object, citing proximity to Jonas, but she had simply stared him down and said, "Who else knows his habits better?" They fought through a security checkpoint, Alu's group moving with drilled precision. 2 Sindar commandos from the flare path flowed alongside them, their movements almost unsettlingly smooth in the lower gravity. Down 3 levels, past a sealed blast door that Hana's remote hack unlatched at the last second, they burst into the Verity chamber. The sight stopped them for a heartbeat. Jonas hung in the halo of the engine, limbs slack, eyes rolled back under translucent lids. Filaments of light licked across his skin, and the air hummed with a resonance that made Yara's teeth ache. Rackle stood at a secondary console, one hand raised in instinctive warding. "Disable the harness," Alu shouted. Yara rushed toward the interface, fingers already searching for physical release catches even as her eyes burned from the engine's glow. Rackle hesitated only a second. The patterns on his console were nonsense now, the lattice's once elegant dance turned into a mad scribble. The human had broken something fundamental, and the Lionheart's arrival made clear that time was gone. If the engine survived, the Dominion might rebuild its certainty around a new core. If it died here, perhaps they would learn caution, or collapse. In that instant, Rackle, creature of a rigid system, made a choice that surprised even him. He stepped back. "Pull the main anchor," he said bitterly, gesturing at a thick conduit near Jonas's head. "Unless you want his brain liquefied." Yara's gaze flicked to him in distrust, then to the cable. She grabbed it with both gloved hands and yanked. It came free with a crackle of discharged energy. Jonas convulsed once and went limp. The engine's light dimmed, ripples fading to a pale, uncertain glow. The cognitive lattice's projections on the chamber walls collapsed into scattered fragments and then went dark. Alu slung Jonas over his shoulder with a grunt. "You're coming with us," he told Rackle, weapon steady. "You're valuable, and maybe you can explain this mess to people who want answers." Rackle looked at the dimmed engine and felt, for the first time in his life, the clean, cold absence of an absolute reference. "No," he said quietly. "I will stay." He meant to atone, perhaps, or to witness, or simply because his world had shrunk to this chamber and he could not imagine leaving it. Alu did not argue. They had little time. They dashed back through smoke and scattered debris, Jonas's weight a constant reminder across Alu's shoulders. Sirens warbled in strange, irregular patterns. Automated systems were arguing with each other through dead networks. By the time they reached their shuttle, Veshori fighters had begun to coordinate manually, finally overriding fractured orders. The Lionheart and Flarepath took hits, armor sizzling and plating buckling, but their drives held. Jammers pulsed, scrambling what remained of the Citadel's aim. As the shuttle docked and the airlock slammed shut behind them, Yara pressed her hand against Jonas's faintly rising chest. "Stay with us, sir," she whispered. He did not answer. The Citadel of Confluence shrank on the Lionheart's external displays, a wounded spider in a web of diminishing light. Across Veshori space, the consequences rippled. In provincial courts, minor magistrates waited for Verity confirmations that did not arrive. Petty disputes over inheritance froze. Major trials involving treason and murder halted at the brink of sentencing. The engine's indicators stayed amber. In fleet command centers, admirals stared at alert icons that read, "Authenticity uncertain. Risk of systemic error elevated. Recommend human oversight." Human oversight in this context meant fallible, anxious officers who had not made unaided judgment calls in their careers. Some moved cautiously, others panicked. Orders conflicted. Sectors that had never known ambiguity woke to it like to a cold wind. The Hallan Pact and the Sindar Enclave, long chafing under Dominion tutelage, watched this hesitation with hungry eyes. At Perihelion Gate, Diego Carvajal stood before the Council of Orbits, where hastily summoned envoys argued in lowered voices. The Veshori representative was livid, carapace flaring in stress patterns. "You have attacked a lawful facility," the envoy declared. "You have compromised the bedrock of interstellar arbitration. Without the Verity Engine, how are we to resolve disputes? How are we to trust one another?" Diego did not raise his voice in reply. He let it carry by steady conviction instead. "You have entrusted your judgment to a device that you do not fully understand," he said. "You built your society on the belief that it could not be deceived, that messy minds could be reduced to clean readings. Today you learned that there are ways of thinking your system was never designed to handle." He looked around the chamber. Hallan eyes, Sindar eyelets, human pupils all watching. "We have not destroyed truth," Diego continued. "We've reminded you that truth is not something a machine can hand you. It is something you must work toward yourselves, understand context, doubt, verify through more than one measure, especially when you are dealing with species whose very strength lies in imagination. You unleashed chaos." The Veshori protested. Diego shook his head. "We revealed the chaos that was always there, beneath your illusion of certainty." On the UES Lionheart, warbled intercom tones softened into the steady background hum of normal operations. Damage control teams patched scorched bulkheads. Sindar technicians shared quiet, almost gleeful conversations with human engineers, both cultures energized by successful mischief. In the medical bay, the lighting was low, machines whispered quietly, and Jonas Marek opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was a familiar neutral white, interrupted by the curved outline of a gravity projector. For a fleeting second he wondered if the Verity Engine had simply reconfigured the chamber to comfort him. Then he saw Yara dozing awkwardly in a chair near his bed, chin on her chest, a datapad slipping from her hand. He moved a little. Everything hurt, but in ordinary physical ways. No alien light crawled along his nerves. His mind felt like someone had shuffled all his memories and then hastily put them back in roughly the right order. The movement stirred Yara. She jerked upright, then blinked, eyes flooding with relief. "Sir," she said, voice cracking. He tried to speak and found his throat dry. "Water," he croaked. She fumbled for a cup, helped him drink clumsily, then hit the call strip. Moments later, Talgren, Lena, and Hana stood at his bedside, expressions a mixture of pride, worry, and a sort of awe. "Welcome back," Talgren said. Jonas's voice was still hoarse. "Did we win?" Lena laughed softly, the sound edged with disbelief at its own existence. "That depends on your definition," she said. "The Citadel is damaged. The Verity Engine is not what it was. The Dominion's response is fractured. Whole regions are pausing to think because their machines won't tell them what to do." Hana added, "The model you forced onto their system is going to haunt them. Every time they interrogate someone now, they'll wonder if a neat, clean answer is too neat. They'll second-guess themselves." Jonas frowned faintly. "I didn't mean to break their whole legal system." "Yes, you did," Hana said bluntly. "Intentionally or not, you showed them that some minds can't be reduced to a single line. You made them live with our kind of uncertainty." He let his head sink back into the pillow. "They kept saying their machine couldn't be lied to," he murmured. "I just showed them that sometimes we lie to ourselves and that counts to the machine as honesty." Talgren studied him. "How did you keep from losing yourself in there?" the captain asked quietly. From what they did, Jonas stared at the ceiling, remembering the labyrinth he had built, the hallways, the doors. I almost did, he admitted. But there was always something in the middle, an idea I could hold on to. What idea? Yara asked, leaning forward. That nothing is completely fixed, Jonas said slowly. That we're all constantly rewriting our own stories. Sometimes that's dangerous. Sometimes it's the only way we change. I just turned that up to an insane degree. Lena's eyes softened. You turned our flaws into a tactic, she said. Maybe, Jonas replied. Or maybe they were always tactics and we just never had to point them at a truth machine before. Hana smiled, a tired, crooked expression. Either way, she said, the galaxy now knows that if you build your entire empire on something you insist can never be wrong, the first human you plug into it will find a way to turn that into a lie. Outside the medical bay, beyond the hull, beyond even the fleet formations shifting hesitantly in distant sectors, countless beings woke to a quieter, stranger universe. One where perfect certainty had blinked. One where a single mind, messy and contradictory and painfully human, had stepped into the center of an empire's most sacred device, and come out the other side having shown it that doubt was not a weakness, but a truth in itself. In time, alliances would realign. The Solar League and its new partners would craft new protocols, mindful that they, too, must not trust any single mechanism more than their own hard-won judgment. For now, though, on a ship streaking away from the heart of the Dominion, a rescued officer closed his eyes and let himself drift, not into a machine's imposed vision, but into his own imperfect dreams. This time, no one else was watching.